The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and good evening from Auckland City. This is Late Night Lockdown, Gone By Lunchtime. Introducing the sultry sounds of the Alert Level 3. Let's TALK politics. And then just play the music, play the music, play the music! Kia ora tātou, I'm Toby Manhire. It's sometime after dark on Tuesday, August 25. A big thank you to Jane Yee for setting us up in lockdown technology land. Big thank you to Flick Electric for keeping the lights on. Please support them by checking out any link off any politics page. Big thanks to members who allow us to keep going, given the state of everything. A big thanks to Tina Tiller and Callum Henderson, who stayed up into the very, very small hours last week to put together, well, which was quite a porridge of a podcast in the end, really, because I can't remember if I recall correctly, Ben Thomas drank several jars of his own piss, couldn't get his headphones to work, and then Jane had to drive halfway across town, and I don't know, by the end I just had no clue what was going on.
It's all essential work.
Ben.
I was a little bit boozed.
I couldn't hear you guys towards the end. I think it became quite political in the sense that I don't think anyone heard what anyone else said, and we just kind of talked, which I think right. Kind of puts us on par with most of the good political podcasts.
Well, I think a bit like the COVID situation, we need to keep the politics out of Gone By Lunchtime. You know, we need to work constructively together in the cause of discourse. How are you, Annabelle?
I'm very good, sober. I was thinking, could we organise the opposition to put a question to the Minister of Health about whether or not it's within ministry guidelines to drink every night during lockdown?
Right. What are the normal guidelines? They're just 5 nights a week. Is that, I don't know, maybe someone should just throw some questions at Ashley about healthy living.
I think not days that start with F and S you're allowed to, but during lockdown I feel that changes, and it'd just be good to have clarification. So if one of the journos at the 1 o'clocker tomorrow, or Shane Reti, Dr Shane Reti, if you could ask, I think it's a question that a lot of Aucklanders are asking.
Just one more question for Dr Bloomfield before you go. Can you tell us which is healthier, 2 litres of Ben Thomas's piss, 2 litres of Mountain Dew, or 2 litres of vodka? And he'd say, what I can say is that the research suggests that at the moment, the ideal option is to stay well away from Ben Thomas's piss.
He'd say, we don't have any evidence that 2 litres of Mountain Dew helps to ward off the virus. Interestingly enough, there was a question from someone in the gallery about lockdown drinking about a week ago, I think, to Chris Hipkins, asking whether the government had any plan, the well-being government that had, allocated $1.9 billion to mental health and addiction services, whether there was any kind of contingency plan for lockdown. And Hipkins just got this kind of quizzical look on his face, and there was this sort of dead silence, and then he said, the government does not encourage excess drinking, and then just sort of uncomfortably moved on. So
You've got to feel a bit for Chippy, as he's known down there. Chris Hipkins has got must be working quite a lot of hours at the moment trying to. I mean, like educate. I mean, he had to stop most of the education in New Zealand's biggest city so that he had more time available to look after health. I'm just stating facts, right? I'm just stating facts. Exactly. We're Tuesday night now, and we've discovered last night on Monday that here in Auckland, the alert level 3 would be pushed out until the very end of the weekend. The rest of the country, luxuriating in alert level 2, will continue in that state as well for a few more weeks, partly so that regional travel can resume, and the Aucklanders, we terrible people who live in Auckland, can travel around and not risk large-scale events, some spreading incident. There are a few other extra rules that will carry on, including that gatherings will be limited to 10, which is roughly the number of people that were listening at the end of the last podcast, I think. So we could all get together if you fancy it. Do you think, Annabelle, that we sort of got used to this kind of, it's almost like got a kind of congregational, religious, traditional function now, these announcements.
Sorry.
Bless you, Ben, bless you. Huge Mountain Dew.
It's not COVID.
Sneeze there. We've got used to this kind of, this non-COVID sneeze. We got used to this ritual of the Prime Minister's announcements. There are these long kind of preambles in which she knows that she has the attention of the nation or a huge number of people, so gets out some messages. Do you think that this time that extension of 4 days has got it right? Do you think that it's testing people's patience? What do you reckon?
I think Derek Chung wrote a very good article about this before her announcement. It's almost a bit of a lose-lose situation. If you extend lockdown, you risk annoying or frustrating voters, certainly business owners, but if you buckle and there's and the spread continues, then you completely blow your chances of being able to eliminate it quickly, and you still get offside with those guys anyway. So I think obviously it was a difficult decision to make, but probably the right one. When she does make those announcements, what fascinates me is when you watch them, because she likes to do a bit of a preamble. I don't know if you guys do this, but I'm like, she's not going to extend. No, she is. Oh, no, she's not. Oh, yes, she's got a great way. She keeps you on the edge of your seat. You're like, which way she go? Oh, no.
That's what you get in like American Idol and X Factor and all that, right? Like they don't, you get that kind of preamble and you think, that's definitely going this way, and then they pull it back the other way.
This one, both before the announcement and during the announcement, when I was doing my kind of Kremlinology.
Okay.
The reason that I predicted it would go till Sunday in the Gone By Lunchtime chats was
that's because you read it on the spin-off.
It was because the expert epidemiologists in the media had been saying that we should have an extra week of lockdown in order to be safe. Other people, but particularly some of the business community, Michael Barnett from former Chamber of Commerce, were saying the lockdown needs to come off, as planned on the Thursday. And if there is one thing that Jacinda Ardern can do as Prime Minister, it's always find a difference to split and a middle ground to hew to. So I figured 4 days would be it. I also successfully, predicted or had my suspicions confirmed early on in her announcement. I thought this was her scratchiest and probably least happy briefing on COVID so far, on the cluster. That wouldn't have presaged good news, I don't think, or, we're out of the woods. Everybody grab the closest sailor and kiss them on the mouth or whatever. I think the news that came through that day of 9 new COVID cases kind of dampened the effect of sort of saying we're out of the woods now, it's all downhill from here, we've done it, victory declared. And instead the messaging had to be around, well, actually to a certain extent we are going to live with this cluster for a certain amount of time.
I think that personally, as speaking again as an epidemiologist in my lounge, it would have been almost impossible to end it as planned in the middle of this week, because the 9 is an issue, but much more so than that. We had a piece on this today. On Friday night at North Shore Hospital, a man in his 30s walked in to the emergency department, COVID positive, was put into ICU, it's currently in ICU, and nobody knows where he got COVID-19. Now they can now use genomic sequencing to say, yes, this is the same cluster. So you go, oh, well, that's sort of reassuring. It's not that fucking reassuring, because, we've got buses involved now, we've got a separate strain, we've got elevator lift buttons. It's a worry, and especially with this guy, because he was symptomatic, and so therefore the infection could track back 5, 6, 7, 8 days, and who knows where, so it's not just the kind of aggregate number so much as those particular cases that they don't have epidemiological links to. They've got the genetic sequencing links to, but it's definitely not out of the woods.
The edges of the cluster, as we like to talk about now, as expert epidemiologists, one and all, seems increasingly remote. One thing I've been interested in is, some of the experts who you might say had a kind of pro-government lean, and the ministers themselves have been saying a lot when the issue of border testing has come up. Well, there are no clear links to the border. That hasn't been proven. There's no evidence it came from the border. Well, as if that's a kind of criticism of the naivety of the people talking about the border, as opposed to a pretty clear admission that the tracing and the testing hasn't gotten to the bottom of this cluster at all. There's no evidence it's come from anywhere else. And it suggests that there are missing links in the chain, from before we found, the index case. And so, I think you're right. People are probably reasonably sensible to be a bit wary. Don your fashion mask on public transport, and continue to wash your hands for the next, few weeks.
And masks will, from now on in level 2 and above, Annabelle, be compulsory, mandatory on public transport and Ubers and aeroplanes. There was a sort of sense of inevitability about that in a way too, and the way that the consensus is growing that masks are an important part of this battle.
Yeah, I can see though why she has been reluctant to make it mandatory, because simply for some whānau they will be unaffordable or inaccessible. So I think that the advice to try and fashion your own, even if it's just using a scarf around your head or whatever, is a good one. In terms of the public transport one, I'm kind of incredulous that we have been able to use public transport, but particularly fly internationally, without everybody being required to wear one on our national carrier. So I think, obviously the advice from WHO has changed over the last couple of months, so it's good to see that New Zealand is responding to that.
It's a kind of, I've heard someone, and I couldn't tell you who, talking about how it comes normalise quite quickly once it gets in, and I think even in my neighbourhood, I don't know about your neighbourhood, Annabelle, but there's been a sort of change. There was hardly anyone wearing them in the weekend, but now you can't move for the masks. You're wearing a Frida Kahlo robe at the moment. That would make a nice mask.
Actually, speaking of masks, someone told me the other day, on the Alien movie, the one that attaches itself to your face to lay the egg in your mouth that bursts out of your guts, you can get one of those masks, which I'm very excited about. Okay. Toby, to be honest, I don't know if me and you are just rolling in Point Chev like at opposite ends or whatever, but I see hardly anyone wearing masks in our neighbourhood.
Well, I went to the supermarket last night.
When I go shopping, I'm usually the only... Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. When I've gone, I've quite often been one of just a handful who are.
Well, we'll have to do some...
And I'm usually hyperventilating too.
You just held up your fingers like you're smoking a cigarette. You're smoking a cigarette through the supermarket.
I'm like hyperventilating in my mask because I always feel like it's slipping off my nose, and I'm trying to It's Orkies, but we'll get used to it. It's a small price to pay, isn't it?
Well, we'll all get one of those Alien Edition ones. It seems like a good idea. One of the best things that happened to Jacinda Ardern, it seemed to me this week. I don't know if you guys caught this, but this chap Donald Trump. I think I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 times. I honestly have lost count. In which he decided to alight on New Zealand as the example of the failure, and it was kind of like these sanctimonious bastards in New Zealand. That'll show them they've had this big surge and it's over for them. He said, "Excuse me," and that was you sort of thought. One's kind of defensive, patriotic backbone sort of crackles into stiff shape, but that was the best thing that could have happened to Jacinda Ardern this week, I would have thought.
This is bigger for New Zealand than that time Lisa Gibbons came to Telethon and pashed up the guy from Coronation Street. This is huge, and also led to hours of entertainment on Twitter on the hashtag NZ Hellhole.
That was a response not to the President of the United States, the most powerful man on earth, but instead some rando Twitter account with 7,000 followers who unfortunately exposed if the team of 5 million and beating COVID is the best of New Zealand, then I think absolutely losing our shit over some random woman in the UK who gently criticised us.
The one that wrote the article. I thought that was about Trump. I did read about
even an opinion piece.
This is
literally an anonymous Twitter account called, No Lockdown UK or something.
Really?
That apparently tweeted about 100 times a day, according to Madeline Chapman's excellent Member of Parliament column today.
Madeline was quite ruthless about that.
I agree with Mad.
Weekly this morning. Anyway, enough of that. We don't need to talk about Twitter. Let's not talk. Let's just close Twitter. Let's just get rid of it. It's killing me. Hey, the National Party, meanwhile, the biggest party in Parliament, do you reckon they've kind of steadied the ship now a bit? This morning, they did their, because they what would have been the caucus run, but now they seem to be doing them in the, what do you call it, Ben? The LCC, the old legislative chamber, so that they can socially distance properly. But they had Judith Collins alongside Dr. Shane, as she's calling him now. It's always Dr. Shane. Have you noticed that? It's like Dr. Shane. I think it's going to be a thing. Dr. Shane works well for them. Dr. Shane. And Paora Goldsmith, of course. But no sign of Jerry B. He wasn't there for this particular occasion. But there was a sort of measured quality to it. And Dr. Shane has been evincing a calmness. I think someone might have even been your mate Liam here. Shout out to Liam, Ben, who said that his manner was a bit like a GP. He's got that kind of quality of assuredness, and he's gonna, even though you may only have 12, 13 days to live, he's going to talk to you carefully and give the impression that he's listening to you, and you'll probably feel calm. You might fall off to sleep. It's possible you might fall off to sleep, but you'll feel reassured and understood, and he'll express complex concepts to you as simply as he can.
I actually don't think that, all joking aside, that you do fall asleep when you listen to him, because I think one of the things that makes him a really effective communicator is that his answers are really concise. He doesn't dawdle. Like you say, he does have that quality of a GP who's able to express complex ideas in a way that's easily understandable, but he does it without rambling. What a difference a week makes. Last week, you literally wouldn't put National in charge of a 2-year-old at a late night podcast. This week, their COVID response looks feasible and strong, and while there's elements of it that haven't gone down well with some, it actually looks like they are people with a plan. I thought they came across as commanding this morning, Judith Collins and Dr. Shane, and he I think what makes him compelling is when you actually have a doctor as the minister of or as the spokesperson for health, it just gives such gravitas, and he doesn't come across as political point scoring. He says if he thinks the government's done well, he's been asking good questions, he's making great suggestions. He comes across as formidable and yet likeable.
The thing he doesn't do is when he says that the government has done something well, it doesn't feel like that's sort of being forced out of him, like the last bit of moisture out of a dishcloth, in the way that on previous occasions, I think there's been I am going to praise the government because that's what we've discussed I'm going to do, whereas you feel like he's just sort of being reasonably considerate. And although there are obviously some questions around the border plans that have been laid out, like the kind of the feasibility of the being tested before coming in and whether or not it's too much of a rush to do the border agency, it does seem all of a sudden just more reasonable. And I wonder, Ben, I mean, the last Labour Health Minister was a doctor as well, Dr. David Clark, but I couldn't help wondering if Dr. Shane had been the health spokesperson for the National Party for the last 6 months, whether things might have felt a bit different with every misstep on the border and testing numbers and all that sort of thing. If you had, I mean, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but if Dr. Shane had been in there, maybe they would have looked much more like, because the problem is, as we get into election, it's that whole show us that you're a government ready to go, show us your government wedding, blah, blah, blah.
Dr. Shane has always been really highly rated within National. He's a very smart guy, he's a very capable guy. He got a little bit of positive press, a year or two ago with his medicinal cannabis private members bill.
Yeah, and on measles.
He was never sort of in the frame for front bench in opposition because he does sort of lack that theatricality, that kind of what you might call. He doesn't show a lot of what you would call political flair, or he's not a good attack politician in the ordinary course of events. That was sort of how he was perceived throughout this term.
He's not standing up in the House waving paper and making noise.
So, this is certainly cometh the hour, cometh the man. This is the exact right circumstances for him and for his style, which is that, he is the sort of person who was always going to be a relatively highly ranked minister in a national government, but wasn't seen as, a big star of opposition because that wasn't necessarily his skill set. On the other hand, as you point out, exactly the skill set that they need right now. He was very good in the House last week, trying to get to the bottom of, the so-called dissonance between Chris Hipkins and the Ministry of Health over why exactly the government believed that there was testing at the border when in fact there wasn't of border staff, and Shane Reti basically got to the point of having the minister admit that the minister had the information, that that his belief that all border staff were being regularly tested seemed to be based on a talking point for a meeting that he had been supplied with by the ministry, and really sort of showed up that it may be the same issues that kind of afflicted David Clark, although nowhere near to the same extent, which is just not drilling in and asking the right questions of the officials to make sure that you've got a good grasp of the information. So, he's done very well. The other thing I think is that National have clearly reoriented. Instead of talking about, maybe we should be coming out of lockdown a bit faster, we've got to care about, we've got to make sure businesses are looked after. They're hewing very close to the government line. So they're saying yes to the wage subsidy, but we'd extend it another 4 days, just like the lockdown has been extended another 4 days. But their key selling point here is the gold-plated border protection. And basically, I think this is their solution to saying, the way that Judith Collins initially was saying, well, we would not have COVID. I would simply not let it through the border. And here they're providing some more detail, some of which stacks up, some of which doesn't. But, shows that they're more, in their eyes, they're more serious about a strong border than the government is.
The fascinating thing about the last week is the swing in National's approach to COVID. So we've gone from, well, it looks like Jerry's been sent to go feed baby yak and change Merv's bedding, and we've got Dr. Shane and Juco stepping up, and we've gone from almost a libertarian approach to the border, like let everyone through, bring in the international students, let's get back to business, to the opposite, a crime and punishment approach of like, we will arrest COVID at the border and send it packing.
That's right.
And no one will, like, closed borders will be even closer.
We
will close the borders.
A zero tolerance approach to COVID. We're going to put the strike raptor force. We're going to let them loose on the COVIDs.
Exactly, and you know what? It will. I think that there will be a lot of people that it resonates with, because the one thing people seem to care more about than anything else at the moment is keeping COVID out. So they're brought into the elimination strategy, and they're going to be even more eliminatey than anyone else.
We did some
fascinating.
Polling. We did some polling with Sticky Beak, which we published yesterday, and got some more coming too. But it showed, I think, 78, maybe 79% of people were backing the elimination strategy, and that was, it's kind of overwhelming. The numbers for National's approach were pretty poor, but I imagine they're only going to get better. It's still one good week does not change the election. And we're now, I just Googled it, 53 days away from the election, just like we were 4 weeks ago. And we're in that funny sort of zone. And we were talking before this, we were saying there's not actually a great deal to talk about. There's a sort of little bit of a, I don't know if you call it a hiatus or a limbo or something, but we've got Parliament, but it's not really Parliament. It's sort of, we're going through some of the motions. We've got some question time, which is good, but we also don't really have a campaign going on. I don't know. What do you make of it, Ben? We do have, I don't know if you saw just recently, Louisa Wall, who's the chair of the Health Committee, has acquiesced to the demands of the National Party and latterly Winston Peters and the New Zealand First Party, who are going to go opposition-y for a while, and so the Health Committee will reconvene, I think just for one day, maybe. I'm not totally clear on that, because I was just reading that before we caught up this evening. But
is it like 2 hours next Wednesday or something? It's going to be
yeah, sounds right. And I guess it'll be basically, we'll just get Ashley Bloomfield in and ask him some questions, which seems kind of fair enough. It doesn't seem like an outrageously kind of antagonistic idea that they want to have throw some questions at the DG.
The minister essentially put the responsibility onto the Ministry of Health and thus the DG for the testing failures, and that question hasn't been satisfactorily resolved, despite what I was saying about Shane Reti's pretty incisive questioning in Parliament last week. Interesting that Louisa Wall is the chair. I don't know if you guys saw that quite blunt interview that she gave to Andrea Vance a couple of weeks ago, airing a bit of not so much dirty laundry of her relationship within the party, but certainly I don't know, flashing some waistband.
Hey team, sorry to interrupt, it's Producer T here, just wanting to tell you about the Spin-Off Members. A new, well, not really new, but an initiative to help us fund all the journalism that you want to know. You can email us, tell us what you want to see, anything you want. Visit thespinoff.co.nz/members. And while you're here, just listen to one of our other podcasts. Do it. I'm telling you, it's a great time. Okay, bye.
To do the TLDR on it, she got deselected from her electorate candidacy by
that's
the Labour
right.
Party,
and then she actually threatened legal action, and as a kind of compromise with the party grandees, she was given a winnable list spot or a high list spot in return for stepping aside from the electorate. And, some of her kind of, which they weren't framed exactly as complaints, but they were framed as observations in this story, are legitimate. She's a very long-serving MP. She basically single-handedly put marriage equality on the agenda, which was then successfully passed against the wishes of some of her more conservative colleagues in the Labour Party in opposition at the time, who thought that it was a distraction away from, retaking the Treasury benches. She's much more experienced and a much more capable legislator than a number of people who have actually become cabinet ministers since in this first term of a Labour government. She's also a Māori woman. There is, the gender imbalance in cabinet has been pretty well noted, and particularly after Meka Whaitiri was sacked as a minister, there was a demographic gap that needed to be filled quite urgently there, and Wall still didn't get a look in, and that's something that obviously rankles a bit with her, and is a little puzzling, I think, to the wider punditocracy.
She's so the seat, of course, that she's in is Marurewa, which makes me wonder, as we speak, that maybe Merv is involved in this in some way. I don't know. He's remember he rang Marcus Lush from Manawira, and you feel like Merv's fingers are all over this, He and Bad Boys of Brexit. Big shout out to Bad Boys of Brexit. Have you got anything to say to the Bad Boys of Brexit, Annabelle?
I just hope they're having fun. That's all.
Yeah.
Just
Do you think
hope
they
that
were
they're
behind
having
the
a good
anonymous
time.
Twitter account that called us a hellhole? There was quite a bit of mayhem, quite a bit of chaos.
Yeah, could be.
Looked to have their fingerprints all over it.
Yes, mischief, mayhem.
Typical
Yes,
Bad
I think you might be onto
Boys.
something there. Shout out to the Bad Boys. There was a little story about the Bad Boys this week, and that Winston Peters had offered some consular assistance to Aaron Banks, the sort of
baddest boy,
poor, posh, rich boy with puzzling Russian connections. And
is he like the drummer in the Bad Boys band?
Yeah, I think he's more like Bez in the Happy Mondays. He's just sort of the dancer. I think a lot of sex appeal. Anyway, I mean, it didn't make a huge splash, that story, but basically it did raise some more questions about exactly what was Winston Peters and New Zealand First relationship with the Bad Boys. Very, very strange little sideshow that's going on. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything about that.
There's been a
we
few
should just move swiftly on.
Did we talk about the Riccarton racecourse last week?
I don't know that we did, no. I mean, although by the end we were all just sort of speaking simultaneously.
That was,
who can say?
possibly the last great PGF swindle. whereby money for the Provincial Growth Fund, which is, dedicated to helping out our beleaguered regions, was spent on Christchurch, a metropolitan centre, getting a nice new racecourse redesign, and some of the workers who came in to work on that from overseas were given priority through the queue for quarantine, which is obviously very constrained capacity, and a lot of New Zealanders who are trying to return can't get through. It just seemed like a kind of a fitting sort of coda for New Zealand First if they are indeed on their way out.
Yeah. Of course, completely separately to that, the racing industry have given large amounts of money to the New Zealand First Foundation, who in turn are quite separate from the New Zealand First Party, who in turn are separate from the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister in charge of the Provincial Growth Fund. So it's a weird I mean, clearly there aren't any, you don't want to join that up. These are just separate things that are all, just as Jerry Brownlee would say, stating facts.
Just a number of things that exist in the ether at the same time. The Serious Fraud Office should actually have its investigation into the New Zealand First Foundation finished. Its decision. They said by September, and they said that COVID had not interfered with their schedule, and so that should actually be coming in the next few days. Maybe that will be the thing which blows the relevance of this podcast out of the water mere hours after it's released.
Yeah, that's true. It'll probably be 5 in the morning.
That'll be it.
They're investigating at the moment questions related to the New Zealand First Foundation. They have already laid charges in relation to a number of donors in the National Party and Jamie Lee Ross, but we await to see whether charges will be laid over that other one. There are also investigations underway into the Auckland mayoralty campaign and the just on it goes. They're just having a happy lockdown over there at the SFO. Hey, I don't know, what else have we got? It's that weird time, given there is that kind of lack of campaigning. I mean, the sort of thing that people really want to see is debates, obviously. So I can just an answer to that question, offer the Youth Wings debate, which is now available on the spinoff.co.nz at the end of a series of pieces. What are you showing to me there? Oh, you're watching it now. Tina's putting her phone up to the Zoom. It's kind of good, I think. Kind of interesting culmination.
Obviously, more interesting than our podcast because Tina's choosing to watch it instead of to listen to what we're actually saying. The knowledge that we're imparting to her via this podcast.
What's Tina drinking?
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Tina. She's on the pineapple and Malibu again.
Pineapple, I think. Yeah. Ashley Bloomfield, just one more question. Malibu, how many parts Malibu would you mix with pineapple for just in the course of well-being while recording a late night lockdown podcast?
I feel like there'd be a high vitamin C content in the Malibu, in the pineapple juice. And the acidity might be good for killing off COVID, much like drinking the detergent, the bleach that Donald Trump recommended. So I think it's probably one of the healthiest beverages you could drink during lockdown.
That's what the question is going to be.
And pineapple.
Dr. Bloomfield, which cocktail is the most effective in fighting COVID?
It's about 21%, is it? Yeah, I'm thinking back to my own Youth Wing days now, casting my mind back to... that's not really a high enough percentage to kill microbes. Really want some Stro.
What was that, Tina, you were just showing? Tina's holding up a note like one of the people in that show I'm watching.
Except we're all too old and blind to read your sign, Tina. You have to write it in really big letters for us.
No, you just have to say something.
Hungry, so at least 40.
That really will kill COVID. You can
I
actually
hope
use it to like wash your hands.
That has to go in. That's
general
absolutely
alcoholic drink.
That's going in. And look, the other thing I was going to give a little plug for is policy.nz, which is a very, very interesting, cool way of comparing the different parties' policies straight down the middle, and you can blind them so you don't know which parties they belong to, and so you're not influenced by your own attractions to particular colours or branding or whatever. So check that out, policy.nz. Before we finish, the other interesting story of the week was a group of young people went to the High Court, a group called Make It 16, who are campaigning to reduce the voting age to 16. And they were going to the High Court in order, I think, to argue that it was discriminatory under the Bill of Rights for people who are age 16 not to be given the vote. It's kind of done, as explained by Andrew Geddes, as a way to kind of apply pressure, in effect, political pressure. What do you think, Annabelle? Do you think 16-year-olds should be allowed to vote?
Bro, my mum got married at 16, so I'm like, if you can like have a kid and get married and get into debt and do all that other shit, then you should definitely be allowed to vote. I think it's silly that we have a group of young people really wanting to engage in the political process and saying that no, they can't. When we have like such low voter numbers in New Zealand, you'd think that we'd be embracing that. So yeah, I definitely think they should.
Ben Thomas.
And then we should remove the votes off the boomers. We should we should legislate against their ability to vote and just move it back down towards let's get the 13-year-olds involved.
What about, Annabelle, if instead we just got you to go through the country and pick out the people that you think deserve to vote and the ones that you don't think deserve to vote?
I think that's an excellent idea.
It might
Let's do that.
Have you got time? Because if you've got the time, I think that might
I'll
be
make the time.
Thank you.
I'll make the time. Me and Tina will load up the car with some Malibus and we will head off.
Some general
That's
label.
what we'll do. We'll load up the Zorb.
Clean skin Malibu.
Check the Zorb in the trailer.
Yeah. We'll head out.
Ben Thomas, give me a good argument against allowing 16-year-olds
I mean,
to vote.
let me just start off by saying nothing burns my skin like the laughter of children. The joy of youth to me is like the sound of nails on a chalkboard. Their hope to me is like a burning light that I can't look directly into. So with that as context, I don't see any kind of pressing reason why you would necessarily drop it to 16. I think, as with most things, you would be asking, well, what's the status quo that we're trying to change and what's the argument for it? And people quite reasonably say, well, why is it set at 18 rather than 17? Why would it be set at 17 rather than 16? Why not 19? I think you'd put it roughly on par with those, joining the army, drinking in a bar. We have these arbitrary age limits, and I don't see any particularly compelling reasons. Obviously, whenever you get these Make It 16 campaigners, the people who present are these extremely earnest, very articulate, very clever young people. But again, I don't think that they're necessarily representative of either the maturation or indeed the level of civic participation of their entire cohort. In principle, I would be much more interested in taking the vote away from over 65s than keeping the under 18s out. Because I think that is the one strong argument I think the 16-year-olds have, which is, they have more of a stake in the future. And I would caveat that by saying more than the old, who should be left to suffer at the whims of everyone else for once.
So I asked you.
It's okay because we'll get rid of them using the new euthanasia bill, so they'll be taken care of. Can I say though that there's one
the end of life choice is good because
obviously I
lets them self-select before we have to take any mandatory action. You
fucking going to euthanize the podcast pretty quickly.
And then if they don't take personal responsibility, then we go back to the drawing board.
Can I say there is one really good reason for changing the age, and that is particularly among Māori voters, there's really low voter turnout. There was a really good piece of research done quite a while ago now, I think it must be about 10 years ago, that shows that a lot of the reason why Māori don't engage in the political process and don't vote is because they don't actually come from homes where that was a part of their family's practice, and so going into the voting booth is an intimidating foreign process for them. If we brought it down to 16, we could teach civics in schools, and that would help to create a culture of political engagement, which has got to be a good thing, right?
I think that's a good point, and I'll add some more points. One of which is, if we are serious about teaching kids about, civics, which is a terrible word, but, civic engagement, how the world works, politics and stuff in school, all the better to make it relevant to them and related. Number two, the thing about elections is they only come round every 3 years, which does seem quite often in this country, but all the same, it's not like, you only once every 3 years they let a new group of people into bars or into the army or being allowed to have sex, So a lot of people, first opportunity to vote is when they're 17 or 18, because that's how it works. And number three, I asked Ben Thomas for one good reason to not allow 16-year-olds to vote, and he just said, I can't see any good reason to change it. And surely the franchise, this precious thing in our democracy, there should be a very good reason to withhold it, not a good reason to grant it.
Well, yeah, but I think then you could say, well, why not 15? There's a lot of things in society that you've got to find a point for, you've got to find an agreed point on, which, why do we drive on the left-hand side of the road, not the right-hand side of the road? No compelling logical reason. We all just have to be on the same side, right? We're going the same way. I mean, because I think, if you decided to include 16-year-olds but not 15-year-olds, the same argument would be made. And, if you really wanted to get into sort of Peter Gluckman-esque arguments about, plasticity and brain development or cognitive function, you probably could, but it all gets a bit strange. I think it's easy and...
Yeah, but you can just send the 15-year-olds to their room and ground them, so you don't have to worry
it's easy enough to
just shut down the conversation.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's easy enough to identify that people who are in about their, sometimes in their third to last year of high school are kids.
The one thing I will say as well, arguing against myself, is one of my oldest friends, we were at university, he was living with his parents for a time, and his dad would open all of their local election voting forms, which arrived, fill them all out and post them back on the basis that he was the best informed and that would be fine and he'd just do it all. So that's obviously a serious reservation. Hey, look, I think we got to the end without collapsing into a great kind of pit of despair. Well done, everybody. Hopefully when we regroup, we will do so at a safe distance in an actual studio. It's really nice to see your faces. It's really nice to imagine all the 7 or 8 people who have made it all the way to the end of tonight's Gone By Lunchtime. Thank you again,
thank
Tina.
you.
Thanks, Ben. Are you going to open those
they're
Mountain Dew
already open. I think
Doritos
somebody's had about half of
now?
them. They're very green.
Shall we, Annabelle, shall we ask him to eat one?
Yes, absolutely.
This is true, listeners. I'm not making this up. He has
This is not
a
the
packet
real
of Mountain
pot.
Dew flavoured Doritos.
We don't eat stupid shit for people's amusement. Like
Recovered from the
I'm not
Zorb.
Alex Casey. I'm not like... I was going to say I'm not laughing in a high-pitched manner, and then I started doing it. So, all right, okay, I'll eat one chip. One...
Eat the chip.
Not good.
Eat the chip.
Oh, no! No! Oh!
You barely let
It's
it...
only being like that because he's
kicks
keto
you
at the
right
moment.
taste with your taste
It's
buds.
horrible. It's like crispy Mountain Dew and salt. Oh my god, no! I'm not into it.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.